This story was shared to me by one of my friends. Listen to the spine-chilling narration, and if you have also experienced any paranormal happening with you, do share with me on this email ID. I will narrate your story to our subscribers in our upcoming videos. Now let's start our real-life spooky tale. I've always been skeptical about paranormal stories, but what happened to me last year made me question everything. I lived in a small apartment in an older building in downtown, the kind with creaky floors and outdated wiring. It was a cold winter night, and my roommate had gone out of town to visit her family. I planned a quiet evening alone, binge-watching my favorite shows with some snacks. It was around midnight when the first strange thing happened. I was wrapped in a blanket on the couch, half asleep, when I heard a soft knock at the door. At first I thought I was imagining it, but then it happened again, a little louder. I paused the show and walked over to the door, peeking through the peephole. No one was there. I shook my head, thinking maybe it was just the wind or some noise from the street. I went back to the couch, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. A few minutes later, there was another knock, and this time louder, and it continued for a long time in a way that I could ignore it. My heart started to race. I looked through the peephole again, and this time I saw a figure standing just out of the view. It was wearing dark clothes, and I couldn't make out any details. I called out, asking who it was, but there was no response. The figure just stood there, unmoving. I felt a chill run down my spine. I decided to call building security, but as I turned away from the door, I heard a scratching sound like fingernails dragging across wood. My breath caught in my throat. I looked back through the peephole, and the figure was gone. I opened the door, my hands shaking, and looked around the hallway. It was empty. There were no footprints in the thin layer of snow outside the building's entrance, and no sign that anyone had been there. I closed the door and locked it, then bolted it for good measure. I couldn't sleep that night, jumping at every creak and groan of that building. The next morning, I told my neighbor about the strange encounter, hoping they might have seen or heard something. My neighbor, an older man named Mr. Thompson, went pale when I described the figure. He told me about a young woman who had lived in my apartment a few years before. She had been a quiet tenant, kept to herself mostly. One night, she had gone missing without a trace. The last anyone saw of her was when she left the building late one night. The police investigated, but they never found any leads. The story gave me chills. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Over the next few days, strange things started happening in my apartment. I would hear knocking sounds coming from the walls, especially at night. Sometimes I would hear what sounded like whispering, but when I tried to listen it closely, it would stop. One night, things reached a peak. I woke up around 1 a.m. to the sound of knocking, but this time it was coming from inside the apartment. It was coming from the wall right behind my headboard. I felt a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. I got up and turned on all the lights, trying to convince myself that it was just the pipes or the heating system. But as I stood there, the knocking moved like someone was tapping along the wall, following me. I called my friend Emily, who lived nearby, and asked if I could stay with her for the night. She agreed, sensing the panic in my voice. I packed a bag and practically ran out of the apartment. When I got to Emily's place, I told her everything. She was as freaked out as I was and insisted I stay with her for a few days. After that night, I couldn't go back to the apartment. I ended up breaking my lease and moving out early. I never found out what was causing the noises or who the figure was at the door. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about it. Was it the spirit of the woman who disappeared? Or was it something else entirely? I don't know, and I don't think I ever wanted to find out.